The massive white ship drifted through the dark space between planets. Red crosses painted on its hull glowed softly in the starlight. This was the UHSS Sanctuary, the largest hospital ship that Earth had ever built. It was bigger than most cities. With 12,000 people working inside its metal walls, Captain Lisa Morgan stood on the bridge looking out at the stars. She had been commanding the sanctuary for 3 years now. Her brown hair was pulled back in a neat bun, and her uniform was always perfectly pressed. She took pride in her ship and her mission. The sanctuary was not a warship. It was a place of healing in a galaxy torn apart by war. The ship moved slowly through the Kepler system. This area of space had seen terrible fighting between two great alien powers. The Zephyrian Empire and the Corvan Alliance had been at war for over 10 years. Millions had died. Planets had been destroyed. But the sanctuary went where others feared to go. It helped anyone who needed medical care, no matter what species they were or which side they fought for. Dr. Kevin Blake walked through the medical bays checking on patients. He was a tall man with kind eyes and gentle hands. As the chief medical officer, he oversaw all the doctors and nurses on the ship. The medical bays were huge rooms filled with beds and medical equipment. Right now, they held wounded soldiers from both sides of the war. In bed number 47 lay a young Zephyrian warrior. His blue skin was pale from blood loss, and his 4 arms were bandaged. Next to him was a Corvan soldier with gray skin and sharp teeth. The two species had been trying to kill each other for years, but here they lay side by side, being cared for by human doctors. Kevin stopped at the bed of a human Marine named Pete Collins. The young man had been hurt in a battle near the Outer Rim. His leg was in a cast, and he looked frustrated at being stuck in bed. "How are you feeling today, Pete?" Kevin asked, checking the patient's chart. "Better, Doc. When can I get back to my unit?" Pete asked. "Not for another week at least. Your leg needs time to heal properly," Kevin replied with a smile. Pete sighed, but nodded. He knew the doctor was right. The sanctuary had the best medical care in the galaxy. Patients who came here had a much better chance of surviving than those treated on regular military ships. Lieutenant Commander Amy Foster sat at her station, monitoring the ship's defenses. The sanctuary was not built for fighting, but it did have some weapons and shields. These were mainly for protection against pirates and raiders. Amy was a serious woman who took her job protecting the ship very seriously. The ship's defensive systems were not very strong compared to real warships. The sanctuary had light shields that could stop small weapons fire and a few laser cannons for emergencies. But its real protection came from something else. The red crosses on its hull marked it as a medical ship. Every civilized species in the galaxy respected the ancient laws that protected hospitals and medical vessels. Navigation. Officer Danny Price plotted the ship's course to the safest routes he could find. He was young and eager, always looking for ways to help the ship avoid dangerous areas. The Kepler system was full of minefields and patrol ships from both warring factions, but there were still safe passages if you knew where to look. "Captain, we're receiving a transmission from the Zephyrian patrol ship Bright Star," Communications Officer Rachel Green reported. Rachel was good at her job and spoke several alien languages fluently. "Put it through," Captain Morgan ordered. The main screen showed a blue-skinned Zephyrian officer with the rank markings of a commander. "USS Sanctuary. This is Commander Velketh of the Bright Star. We have wounded that need immediate medical attention. Request permission to transfer patients." "Permission granted, Commander. We'll prepare to receive your wounded in Medical Bay 3, Captain Morgan replied. This was how it always worked. Both sides of the war brought their wounded to the sanctuary. The ship's medical staff treated everyone equally, following the old codes that said doctors must help all who needed healing. Chief Engineer Tony Martinez worked deep in the ship's engine rooms. The sanctuary was powered by 3 massive fusion reactors that provided energy for everything from life support to the medical equipment. Tony was a practical man who knew every pipe and wire in the ship. He made sure everything ran smoothly, so the doctors could do their work. The engine room was a maze of machinery and computer systems. Tony's team of 100 engineers worked around the clock to keep everything running. The sanctuary used more power than a small city because of all its medical equipment. The operating rooms alone needed enormous amounts of energy to run. Their advanced surgical machines. Tony were getting some strange readings from Reactor 2. Called out Engineer Sarah Lopez. She was one of Tony's best people, and if she was worried, it was worth checking out. Tony walked over to look at the readings. Probably just a sensor glitch. Run a full diagnostic and let me know what you find. In the medical research labs, Dr. Helen Park worked on developing new treatments for alien diseases. She was a brilliant scientist who had made several important discoveries since joining the sanctuary. Her work had saved thousands of lives by finding cures for illnesses that affected multiple species. The research labs were some of the most advanced facilities in the galaxy. They had equipment that could analyze alien biology and create new medicines. Dr. Park's team had recently developed a treatment for a disease that was killing Corvan children. The cure had been shared freely with both sides of the war. Captain Morgan made her rounds through the ship every day. She visited the wounded soldiers, talked to the medical staff, and checked on the ship's operations. The sanctuary was her life, and she was proud of what they accomplished. In the main cafeteria, humans worked alongside alien medical staff. The ship employed doctors and nurses from many different species. They all worked together toward the same goal of saving lives. The sight of different species cooperating peacefully was rare in a galaxy at war. The sanctuary's mission was simple but important. It provided medical care to anyone who needed it. The ship operated under the protection of medical neutrality laws. These ancient rules said that medical facilities could not be attacked even during war. Every civilized species followed these laws because they knew that someday they might need medical help too. As the ship continued its journey through the Kepler system, everything seemed normal. The medical staff treated patients, the engineers maintained the ship, and the bridge crew navigated through space. None of them knew that danger was approaching. Far out in the darkness of space, something was moving toward them. Ships without markings or identification were closing in on the sanctuary. These were not the ships of any known faction. They belonged to something much more dangerous. The unknown vessels moved in perfect formation, their dark hulls almost invisible against the stars. They had been tracking the hospital ship for days, waiting for the right moment to strike. Unlike the civilized species that respected medical neutrality, these attackers had no such beliefs. Captain Morgan stood on the bridge, unaware of the approaching threat. She was reading reports from the medical staff about their recent patients. The sanctuary had treated over 50,000 wounded beings in the past year. Each one had been given the best care possible, regardless of their species or which side they fought for. Captain, I'm picking up some unusual readings on long-range sensors, reported sensor operator Mike Chun. What kind of readings? Captain, Morgan asked. Unknown ships moving in formation. They're still far out, but they seem to be heading in our direction. Captain Morgan frowned. It was unusual for ships to approach the sanctuary without identifying themselves first. Most vessels in the area knew about the hospital ship and its mission. Keep monitoring them. Let me know if they get any closer, she ordered. None of them realized that their peaceful mission was about to be shattered by an enemy that respected no laws and showed no mercy. The unknown ships came out of the darkness like hungry wolves. There were 12 of them, each one black as the space around them. They had no markings, no flags, and no signs to show what nation or species they belonged to. Captain Lisa Morgan watched them approach on the main screen, feeling a cold fear growing in her stomach. "They're not responding to our signals, Captain," Communications Officer Rachel Green reported. Her voice was tight with worry. "I've tried every frequency, but they won't answer." "Maybe their communication systems are damaged," suggested Navigation. Officer Danny Price, though he did not sound convinced. Captain Morgan shook her head. She had been in space for 20 years, and something felt very wrong about these ships. They moved too perfectly, like they were hunting. No damaged ship could fly in such tight formation. "Battle stations," she ordered quietly. The bridge crew looked at her in shock. The sanctuary had never gone to battle stations before. It was a hospital ship, protected by the ancient laws of medical neutrality. No one attacked medical vessels. "Captain, are you sure?" asked Lieutenant Commander Amy Foster. "We're clearly marked as a medical ship. They can see the red crosses on our hull." "I'm sure," Captain Morgan replied, though her heart was pounding. "Something is very wrong here." Alarms began to sound throughout the massive ship. In the medical bays, Dr. Kevin Blake looked up from the patient he was examining. The alarm meant danger, but that seemed impossible. The sanctuary was safe. It had always been safe. "What's happening?" asked Nurse Jenny Williams, who was checking on a wounded Corvin soldier. "I don't know," Kevin replied, but he was already moving toward the intercom system. "This is Dr. Blake. All medical staff, prepare for emergency procedures. Secure all patients and equipment." In the engine room, Chief Engineer Tony Martinez felt the ship's systems switching to combat mode. The reactors automatically increased power output, and the shields came online. But the sanctuary's shields were weak compared to real warships. They were only meant to protect against space debris and small weapons. "Tony, what's going on up there?" asked Engineer Sarah Lopez. "Don't know, but let's make sure everything is running at full power," Tony replied. "Check all systems. I want to be ready for anything." On the bridge, sensor operator Mike Chon watched the approaching ships with growing alarm. "Captain, they're powering up weapons. Energy readings are off the charts." Captain Morgan felt her blood turn to ice. This could not be happening. No one attacked hospital ships. It was one of the oldest laws in the galaxy. Even the most savage pirates respected medical neutrality. Raise shields. "All hands, brace for impact," she ordered. The words had barely left her mouth when the first energy beams struck the sanctuary. The ship shook violently as the weak shields tried to absorb the massive attack. Lights flickered on the bridge, and sparks flew from damaged control panels. "Shields down to 60%, Amy Foster reported, her voice steady despite the chaos around them. More weapons fire hit the ship. The hull groaned under the assault, and the lights went out for several seconds before emergency power kicked in. The sanctuary was never built to take this kind of punishment. In Medical Bay 3, the lights went out just as Dr. Blake was operating on a wounded Zephyrian pilot. The emergency lighting came on, casting everything in a red glow. The patient's life signs were dropping. "Keep working," Kevin told his surgical team. "We don't stop just because someone is shooting at us." Nurse Williams held the light steady while Kevin continued the operation. Around them, other medical staff were securing patients and moving the most critical cases to the center of the ship, where the armor was thickest. Another massive hit rocked the sanctuary. This time, the attack punched through the shields and tore a hole in the ship's outer hull. Atmosphere began rushing out into space, and emergency bulkheads slammed shut to prevent the entire section from losing air. "Hull breach on Deck 7, reported Damage Control Officer Lisa Park, sealing off the damaged sections now. Captain Morgan could not believe what was happening. Someone was actually attacking a hospital ship. It went against everything civilized beings believed in. The red crosses on the sanctuary's hull were supposed to protect them from this kind of violence. "Try to contact them again," she ordered Rachel Green. "Still no response, Captain. It's like they don't care that we're a medical vessel." The attacking ships moved closer, their weapons firing continuously. The sanctuary's shields collapsed completely, and the hull began taking direct hits. Explosions echoed through the corridors as power conduits overloaded and bulkheads buckled under the assault dot in the research labs. Dr. Helen Park was trying to evacuate her team when a blast tore through the wall. The lab's main computer exploded in a shower of sparks, destroying years of medical research. 3 of her assistants were injured by flying debris. "Get them to Medical Bay 5, Helen shouted over the noise of alarms and explosions. "Move, move, move." The ship's defensive weapons finally came online. The sanctuary had 6 laser cannons, originally installed to fight off pirates. They were pathetic compared to the firepower attacking them, but Captain Morgan ordered them to return fire anyway. "All weapons fire at will," she commanded. The small laser cannons shot back at the attacking ships, but their beams barely scratched the enemy hulls. It was like trying to fight a battleship with a slingshot. The enemy vessels ignored the defensive. Fire and continued their assault. Communications Officer Rachel Green was desperately trying to send out a distress call. The main communication array had been destroyed in the first attack, but she was using the backup systems to broadcast on every frequency she could reach. "Mayday, Mayday. This is the UHSS Sanctuary under attack by unknown vessels. We are a medical ship operating under neutrality laws. Request immediate assistance. Repeat, hospital ship under attack." The message went out into space, reaching several military forces in the area. Among those who received it were the Earth Defense Force's 3rd Battle Squadron, a Zephyrian task force, and a Corvan fleet. All 3 were shocked by what they heard. Attacking a hospital ship was unthinkable. In the sanctuary's main medical bay, chaos ruled. Wounded patients were being moved to safer areas, while new casualties from the attack itself began arriving. Dr. Blake worked frantically to save as many lives as possible, while explosions shook the ship around him. "Doctor, we have 17 crew members injured on Deck 12, reported a young medic. "Take them to Emergency Treatment Room 4, Kevin replied without looking up from his patient. "And tell security to arm themselves. If these attackers board us, we need to protect the patients." Commander Pete Harris, the ship's security chief, was already mobilizing his small force. The sanctuary only had 200 security personnel, meant to deal with unruly patients and minor disturbances. They were not equipped to fight off a boarding party from hostile warships. "Arm everyone who can hold a weapon," Pete ordered his men. "We protect the medical staff and patients no matter what." The attacking ships moved even closer, and Captain Morgan could see them clearly now on the main screen. They were sleek and deadly, with strange markings that hurt to look at. The hulls seemed to absorb light, making them appear like holes in space itself. "What are those things?" whispered Navigation Officer Danny Price. Before anyone could answer, the enemy ships launched boarding pods. Small craft shot out from the attackers and headed straight for the sanctuary's hull. They were coming to finish the job in person. The boarding pods struck the hospital ship like bullets, punching through the damaged hull and lodging themselves deep inside. Cutting tools began working immediately, preparing to release whatever was inside onto the defenseless medical vessel. Captain Morgan watched in horror as her ship was invaded by an enemy that showed no mercy and followed no rules. The sanctuary had always been a place of healing and hope. Now it was becoming a battlefield. "All crew, prepare to repel boarders," she announced over the ship's communication system. Protect the patients at all costs. In the corridors of the great hospital ship, the sound of cutting tools echoed like the growl of hungry beasts. Whatever was in those boarding odds was about to break through, and the crew of the sanctuary would have to fight for their lives and the lives of their patients. The unthinkable had happened. Someone had attacked a hospital ship, breaking the most sacred law of civilized warfare. Now the people whose job was to heal would have to learn how to kill. Admiral Jack Collins stood on the bridge of the EDF battleship Defiant when the distress call reached them. He was a tall man with gray hair and hard eyes that had seen too much war. For the past 3 hours, his fleet had been in a tense standoff, with Zephyrian forces near the edge of the Kepler system. Both sides had their weapons ready, waiting for someone to make the first move. "Sir, we're receiving an emergency transmission," reported Communications Officer Bill Turner. "It's from the hospital ship Sanctuary." "Put it through," Admiral Collins ordered. The voice of Rachel Green filled the bridge, crackling with static and desperation. "Mayday, mayday. This is the UHSS Sanctuary under attack by unknown vessels. We are a medical ship operating under neutrality laws. Request immediate assistance." Admiral Collins felt his blood run cold. Someone was attacking a hospital ship. In all his years of military service, he had never heard of such a thing. Even in the worst battles of the war, both sides respected medical vessels. "Get me a direct line to the Zephyrian commander," he ordered. "Right now." On the other side of the battlefield, Commander Zara Velvek received the same distress call aboard her cruiser Stormbringer. She was a proud warrior with blue skin and 4 arms, each one decorated with battle scars. The Zephyrians had been fighting humans for years, but they shared the same respect for medical neutrality. "Humans attacking their own medical ship?" asked her first officer, confused by the message. "No," Zara replied, studying the sensor readings. "These are different ships. Unknown vessels with no markings, and they're firing on the sanctuary." "When?" Admiral Collins' communication request came through. Zara hesitated for only a moment before accepting it. The two commanders appeared on each other's screens, enemies who had been trying to kill each other just minutes before. "Admiral Collins," Jack said simply. "Commander Velvek," Zara replied with equal formality. "You heard the distress call?" Jack asked. "Yes, someone is attacking the medical ship." "This cannot be allowed to continue." For a moment, neither commander spoke. They were supposed to be enemies, but both understood that some things were more important than their war. The sanctuary had treated wounded from both their fleets. Human and Zephyrian doctors had worked side by side to save lives. Temporary. "Ceasefire?" Jack suggested. "Agreed." "Joint rescue operation?" "Agreed." The conversation lasted less than 2 minutes, but it changed everything. For the first time in the war, human and Zephyrian forces would fight together instead of against each other. Meanwhile, another fleet had received the distress call. The Corvin Alliance battle group was led by Battle Commander Kresh Morduk aboard the massive dreadnought Iron Fang. Kresh was a giant even by Corvin standards, with gray skin like stone and teeth sharp enough to bite through metal. "Hospital ship. Under attack," reported his communications officer. "Both human and Zephyrian fleets are moving to assist." Kresh growled deep in his throat. The Corvins were a warrior people who respected strength above all else. But they also had strict codes about protecting the weak and defenseless. Attacking a medical ship was the act of cowards. "Who dares break the sacred laws?" Kresh demanded. "Unknown vessels, Commander." But the sensor readings match old records. These might be Void Hunters. The name sent a chill through the bridge. The Void Hunters were ancient enemies of all living beings. They were part machine, part something else, and they believed that biological life was a disease that needed to be cured. They had vanished centuries ago, But if they were back, every living thing in the galaxy was in danger. Set course for the medical ship, Kresh ordered. Maximum speed. Sir, the humans and Zephyrians will be there too. Do we fight them as well? Kresh considered this for a moment. The Corvins were at war with both species, but the Void Hunters were enemies of all life itself. No, today we fight together. Captain Ben Walker of the EDF destroyer Swift was the first to respond to Admiral Collins' orders. His ship was fast and well armed, perfect for a rescue mission. Ben was young for a ship captain, but he had proven himself in several battles against both alien species. All hands, prepare for combat, Ben announced over his ship's intercom. We're going to save that hospital ship. The Swift raced through space toward the sanctuary, followed by the rest of Admiral Collins' battle group. Behind them came the Zephyrian fleet, and from another direction, the Corvin ships approached at full speed. On the sanctuary, the situation was getting worse by the minute. The boarding pods had broken through the hull, and strange creatures were pouring into the ship's corridors. They looked like a nightmare mixture of machine and dead flesh, with glowing red eyes and weapons built into their arms. Commander Pete Harris led his security team in a desperate fight to protect the medical bays. His men were brave, but they were facing an enemy unlike anything they had ever seen. The Void Hunters felt no pain and showed no mercy. They shot at anything that moved, including helpless patients. Fall back to Medical Bay 2, Pete shouted. Over the sound of gunfire, protect the wounded. Dr. Kevin Blake continued operating, even as the battle raged outside his surgical suite. He could hear weapons fire in the corridors, but he could not abandon his patient. A young human Marine lay on the table, his life hanging by a thread. Doctor, we need to evacuate, urged Nurse Jenny Williams. Not until this surgery is finished, Kevin replied firmly. I won't let him die because some monsters decided to attack a hospital. In the ship's engine room, Chief Engineer Tony Martinez worked frantically to keep the power running. The Void Hunters had damaged several key systems, and life support was failing in some sections of the ship. Reroute power from the recreational areas, Tony ordered his team. Medical bays get priority for everything. Engineer Sarah Lopez looked up from her control panel with worry. Tony, if we lose main power, thousands of patients will die. And we don't lose main power, Tony replied grimly. The first ships from the rescue fleet arrived to find the sanctuary surrounded by 12 black vessels that seemed to absorb light itself. The hospital ship was badly damaged, with atmosphere venting from multiple hull breaches and fires burning in several sections. Captain Ben Walker brought the Swift in fast, its weapons already charged and ready. Target the nearest enemy vessel. Fire all weapons. The destroyer's laser cannons and missile launchers unleashed their fury on the Void Hunter ships. The enemy vessels were tough, but they had not expected to face a real warship. One of them exploded under the Swift's assault. More ships arrived every minute. Admiral Collins brought his battleship into the fight, its massive guns tearing into the Void Hunter fleet. Commander Velvek's Zephyrian cruisers attacked from another angle, their exotic energy weapons cutting through enemy hulls. Then Battle Commander Kresh arrived with his Corvin dreadnought. The Iron Fang was the largest ship in the battle, and its weapons were designed to destroy entire fleets. When it opened fire, 3 Void Hunter vessels were vaporized in seconds. The sight was incredible. Human, Zephyrian, and Corvan ships fighting side by side for the first time in history. Their weapons' fire lit up the darkness of space as they worked together to destroy the enemies of all life. This is Admiral Collins to all ships, Jack announced on an open channel that reached every vessel in the area. Coordinate your attacks. We end this now. Agreed, replied Commander Velvek. Zephyrian fighters will provide close support. Corvin heavy ships will target their largest vessels, added Battle Commander Kresh. The alliance was working. The Void Hunters, who had expected to face only a defenseless hospital ship, found themselves fighting 3 different fleets at once. Their ships began to retreat, but the Allied forces pressed their attack. On the Sanctuary, Captain Lisa Morgan watched the battle through the bridge's cracked view screen. She could hardly believe what she was seeing. Her enemies had become her rescuers, all working together to save her ship and its patients. "Captain, we're receiving landing requests from all 3 fleets," reported Communications Officer Rachel. "Green, they want to send medical teams and Marines to help us." "Grant them all permission," Lisa replied without hesitation. "Anyone who wants to help save lives is welcome aboard." The alliance born in battle was about to become something even greater. Ships that had been trying to destroy each other were now docking with the Sanctuary to provide aid and assistance. The galaxy was about to change forever. The Allied fleet arrived to find the Sanctuary dying. The massive hospital ship was tilted at a strange angle, its hull torn open in dozens of places. Atmosphere leaked out like blood from wounds, forming glittering clouds of ice crystals in the cold space. Fires burned inside the ship, visible through the breached sections. The sight made even hardened warriors feel sick. Admiral Jack Collins watched from the bridge of his battleship as his sensors showed the full damage. Half of the Sanctuary's medical bays were destroyed or venting atmosphere. Thousands of patients and medical staff were trapped inside a ship that was slowly dying around them. "How many people are on that ship?" asked his first officer. 12,000 crew and patients, Jack replied grimly. "We need to get them out fast." Commander Zara Velvik was thinking the same thing aboard her cruiser. The Zephyrian commander had 4 arms, and all of them were working at different control panels as she coordinated her fleet's approach. Her people were warriors, but they also understood the value of life. "Launch all rescue shuttles," she ordered. "Get our medical teams over there now." Battle Commander Kresh Morduk needed no orders from anyone. The giant Corvin was already sending his biggest transport ships toward the hospital vessel. His people were not known for their gentleness, but they would fight to the death to protect those who could not protect themselves. "Iron Fang to all Corvin ships," Kresh announced. "Anyone who hurts the healers dies. Anyone who saves them lives with honor." The space battle continued around them. The remaining Void Hunter ships were fighting desperately, but they were outnumbered and outgunned. Captain Ben Walker's destroyer Swift danced between the enemy vessels, its weapons firing constantly. The young captain had proven himself a skilled fighter, and his crew followed his every order without question. "Target their engines," Ben commanded as he pursued a fleeing Void Hunter ship. "Don't let any of them escape." The enemy vessel tried to turn and fight, but the Swift was too fast. Ben's gunners put 3 missiles into the Void Hunter's engine room, and the ship exploded in a ball of fire and metal. But the real battle was happening inside the Sanctuary itself. The Void Hunters had sent boarding parties throughout the hospital ship, and they were trying to kill everyone they found. These creatures were not like any enemy the galaxy had seen before. They looked like corpses that had been rebuilt with machines. Their eyes glowed red in faces that should have been dead. Weapons grew from their arms like metal bones, and they felt no pain when shot. Commander Pete Harris led his security teams in a running battle through the ship's corridors. His men were brave, but they were facing monsters. The Void Hunters shot at anyone they saw, including patients lying helpless in their beds. "Medical Bay 7 is under attack," reported Sergeant Tom Miller over the radio. "They're killing the wounded." Pete felt rage burn in his chest. These things were murdering people who could not fight back. It was the worst crime he could imagine. "Hold them off," Pete ordered. "Help is coming." That help came from an unexpected source. Lieutenant Sue Parker was leading the first joint boarding party in galactic history. Her team included human Marines, Zephyrian shock troops, and Corvan warriors. They had been enemies just hours before, but now they fought together like old friends. The human Marines wore standard combat armor and carried pulse rifles. The Zephyrians had 4 arms, so they could use twice as many weapons. Their blue skin was covered with natural armor that could stop small bullets. The Corvans were massive creatures with thick gray hide and claws that could tear through metal. Together, they made a team that could fight anything. "Stay together," Sue ordered as they moved through the damaged corridors. "Watch each other's backs." The first Void Hunter they met was trying to break down the door to a children's medical ward. Inside, young patients from several species were crying in fear while nurses tried to protect them. The monster was using some kind of cutting laser built into its arm to burn through the metal door. Sue's team hit the creature from behind. The Marines fired their pulse rifles, while the Zephyrians used their energy weapons. The Corvan warrior simply charged forward and tore the thing apart with his bare claws. It took all of their combined firepower to finally stop the Void Hunter. "Is everyone okay in there?" Sue called through the door. "We're fine now," came the voice of a nurse. "Thank you for saving us." Dr. Kevin Blake was still operating when this fighting reached his surgical suite. He had 3 patients on tables, all of them close to death. Around him, his medical team worked frantically to save lives while explosions echoed through the ship. "Doctor, we need to evacuate," urged Nurse Jenny Williams. "Not until these surgeries are finished," Kevin replied firmly. "I don't abandon patients." Just then, 2 Void Hunters broke through the wall. Their red eyes focused on the helpless patients, and weapons extended from their arms. They were about to fire when Kevin stepped between them and his patients. "You want to kill someone?" he said quietly. "You go through me first." The monsters raised their weapons, but before they could fire, human Marines burst through another wall. The soldiers shot both Void Hunters, saving the doctor and his patients. "Thanks for the help," Kevin said calmly, then went back to his surgery. The Marine sergeant looked at his men in amazement. The doctor had been willing to die to protect his patients. It was the bravest thing any of them had ever seen. In the engine room, Chief Engineer Tony Martinez was fighting his own battle against failing systems. The Void Hunters had damaged the ship's main power grid, and life support was failing in several sections. "We're losing power to Medical Bay 12, reported Engineer Sarah Lopez. "Reroute everything from non-essential systems," Tony ordered. "I don't care if we lose lights in the hallways. The patients come first." A Void Hunter appeared behind them, its weapon charging up to fire. But before it could shoot, a massive Corvan warrior grabbed it and threw it into a wall, so hard that the creature's metal parts scattered across the floor. "Corvan engineering team here to help," the warrior said in broken human speech. "We fix ship together." Tony nodded gratefully. Even in the middle of battle, help was coming from the most unexpected places. Above them, the space battle was turning in favor of the Allied fleet. The Void Hunter ships were tough, but they could not stand against 3 different fleets working. Together, Admiral Collins coordinated the attack, while Commander Velvek's fighters provided close support. Battle Commander Kresh used his massive guns to destroy the largest enemy vessels. 2 enemy ships trying to escape, reported Captain Ben Walker. "Don't let them get away," Admiral Collins replied. "We can't let word of this attack spread to other Void Hunter fleets." The Swift and 2 Zephyrian cruisers chased down the fleeing ships and destroyed them. Now the Allied fleet could focus entirely on saving the sanctuary and its people. Rescue shuttles from all 3 species began docking with the hospital ship. Medical teams worked together to evacuate the most seriously wounded patients. Human doctors worked alongside Zephyrian healers and Corvan field medics. They had different techniques, but they all shared the same goal of saving lives. Captain Lisa Morgan coordinated the evacuation from her damaged bridge. Half of her control panels were dead, and the main view screen was cracked, but she refused to abandon her post. "How many patients have we evacuated?" she asked. "About 3,000 so far," reported Communications Officer Rachel Green. "But we still have thousands more to go." "Keep working," Lisa ordered. "Every life matters." In the damaged corridors, the joint boarding parties continued their sweep for remaining void hunters. Lieutenant Sue Parker's team had linked up with several other groups, creating a small army of humans, Zephyrians, and Corvins working together. They found Commander Pete Harris, defending a group of patients in what used to be the main cafeteria. He was wounded, but still fighting, his small security team surrounded by void hunter corpses. "Cavalry's here," Sue announced as her team joined the fight. Together, they cleared the last of the monsters from that section of the ship. Pete looked around at the mixed group of soldiers and shook his head in amazement. "Never thought I'd be happy to see Zephyrian and Corvin troops on my ship," he said. "War makes strange friends," replied a Zephyrian warrior. The battle for the sanctuary was almost over. The last few void hunters were being hunted down and destroyed. The space around the hospital ship was filled with rescue vessels from 3 different fleets, all working together to save lives. What had started as an attack on a defenseless medical vessel had become something much more important. It had shown the galaxy that some things were more precious than war. The Alliance born in battle was about to change everything. The last void hunter ship exploded in a brilliant flash of light, its pieces scattered across the dark space around the sanctuary. Admiral Jack Collins watched from his bridge as the final enemy vessel was destroyed, but he felt no joy in the victory. The cost had been too high. The hospital ship that had once been a symbol of hope now drifted like a wounded animal. Half of its hull was torn open, and fire still burned in several sections. Atmosphere continued to leak from the damaged areas, forming clouds of ice crystals that caught the light from nearby stars. "Final count," Admiral Collins asked his communications officer. "All enemy vessels destroyed, sir. No survivors detected." Jack nodded grimly. The void hunters were gone, but the damage they had caused would take months to repair. More importantly, they had broken something that had seemed unbreakable. The idea that medical ships were safe was gone forever. On the bridge of the sanctuary, Captain Lisa Morgan sat in her command chair, her uniform torn and her face covered with soot from the fires. Her ship was crippled, but it was still alive. More importantly, most of her people were still alive too. "Casualty report," she asked quietly. Communications Officer Rachel Green checked her screens with trembling hands. 437 dead, 912 wounded. But we saved over 11,000 people, Captain. Lisa closed her eyes for a moment. Every death was a failure in her mind, but she knew it could have been much worse. Without the help of the 3 fleets, everyone on the sanctuary would have died. "Send a message to all rescue ships," she ordered. "Thank them for saving us." The space around the hospital ship looked like a small city. Rescue vessels from 3 different species were docked with the sanctuary or flying nearby. Human medical ships worked alongside Zephyrian hospital cruisers and Corvan medical transports. It was the largest rescue operation in galactic history. Dr. Kevin Blake walked through the temporary medical bays that had been set up on the rescue ships. He was exhausted, his surgical scrubs stained with blood from a dozen different species. But he kept working, moving from patient to patient without rest. In one bed lay a human Marine who had been injured fighting the void hunters. Next to him was a Zephyrian pilot who had been wounded when his fighter was shot down. The bed after that held a Corvan warrior who had been hurt during the boarding action. All three had been enemies just hours before, but now they were being treated by the same medical team. "How are they doing?" asked Nurse Jenny Williams, who was checking on the patients. "They'll all live," Kevin replied with a tired smile. "That's what matters." In another section of the rescue fleet, Lieutenant Sue Parker was helping coordinate the joint security teams. Human Marines, Zephyrian shock troops, and Corvin warriors were working together to search every part of the sanctuary for any remaining Void Hunters. "Sector 7 is clear," reported a Zephyrian officer over the radio. "Sector 12 also clear," added a Corvin warrior. Sue looked around at the mixed groups of soldiers and shook her head in amazement. Just yesterday, these people had been shooting at each other. Today they were working together like they had been allies for years. Commander Pete Harris was bandaging a wound on his arm when a Corvin medic approached him. The giant gray-skinned warrior carried medical supplies that looked tiny in his massive hands. "Let me help with that," the Corvin said in careful human speech. Pete hesitated for a moment. This creature's people had killed many of his friends in battle, but the Corvin had also helped save the sanctuary and its patients. "Thanks," Pete said finally, extending his injured arm. The Corvin worked carefully, his clawed fingers surprisingly gentle as he applied the bandage. "You fought well for the healers," he said. "This brings honor to your people." Pete found himself smiling despite everything. "You fought well too. Thank you for helping us." In the command center that had been set up on Admiral Collins' flagship, the three fleet commanders met face to face for the first time. Admiral Jack Collins represented humanity with his gray hair and weathered face. Commander Zara Velvek stood tall on her four legs, her blue skin marked with battle scars. Battle Commander Kresh Mordic towered over both of them, his massive frame making the room seem small. "The sanctuary will need months of repairs," Jack said, looking at the damage reports. "My people have medical ships that can help," Zara offered. "The wounded should not suffer while the ship is being fixed." "Corvin engineers are the best in the galaxy," Kresh added. "We will help rebuild what was destroyed." The three commanders looked at each other in silence for a moment. They had been enemies for so long that cooperation felt strange. But something had changed during the battle. They had seen what happened when civilized beings worked together instead of fighting. "What do we do about the war?" Jack asked finally. It was the question that none of them wanted to face. Their governments were still at war, but their fleets had just fought together to save lives. How could they go back to trying to kill each other? "The Void Hunters may return," Zara said thoughtfully. "They are enemies of all life. We should be ready for them." "Agreed," Kresh rumbled. "My people remember the old stories. The Void Hunters will not stop until all biological life is dead." Jack nodded slowly. An idea was forming in his mind, something that would have seemed impossible just days before. "What if we created a joint task force?" he suggested. "Ships from all three fleets, working together to protect medical vessels and fight threats like the Void Hunters." The idea hung in the air like a new star being born. It was revolutionary, dangerous, and absolutely necessary. 3 days later, the signing ceremony took place aboard the damaged sanctuary. The hospital ship's main conference room had been repaired just enough to hold the historic meeting. Representatives from all three governments had come to witness something that had never happened before. Captain Lisa Morgan stood at the front of the room, her ship's medical staff around her. These were the people who had been willing to die to protect their patients. They deserved to see this moment. Admiral Collins signed first, his name bold and clear on the document. Commander Velvek signed with all four of her hands, each one representing a different aspect of Zephyrian honor. Battle Commander Kresh marked the paper with his clawed thumb, leaving a print that would last forever. The document was called the Sanctuary Accords, named after the ship where it was signed. It established new laws for protecting medical vessels and created the Joint Defense Force to fight threats to all civilized life. Dr. Blake watched from the back of the room, still wearing his surgical scrubs. The man who had been willing to stand between his patients and monsters was now seeing history being made. "Think it will work?" asked Nurse Williams, standing beside him. "It has to," Kevin replied. "We've seen what happens when good people work together. That's stronger than any weapon." Outside the conference room, the rescue operation continued. Ships from 3 different species worked side by side to evacuate patients and repair the sanctuary. Medical teams that had once treated only their own people now worked together to save anyone who needed help. The war was not over. There would still be battles and conflicts between the 3 powers. But something fundamental had changed. The attack on a hospital ship had shown the galaxy that some things were more important than politics or territory. Captain Morgan received the Galactic Medal of Honor from all 3 governments, becoming the first human to be recognized by every major power at the same time. But she was not the only hero of the sanctuary. Every person who had risked their life to protect the wounded received recognition. The rebuilt sanctuary launched 6 months later, bigger and better than before. It was escorted by ships from all 3 fleets, including the Swift, the Stormbringer, and the Iron Fang. The hospital ship that had almost been destroyed became a symbol of what was possible when enemies chose to work together. Years later, children from all 3 species would learn about the Battle of Sanctuary in their schools. They would hear about the human doctors who refused to abandon their patients, the mixed crews who fought together against monsters, and the commanders who chose cooperation over conflict. The galaxy was still a dangerous place, but it was also a place where hope could grow. The hospital ship continued its mission, healing the wounded and showing that even in the darkest times, the light of compassion could bring enemies together and change the course of history. Dr. Blake stood in the sea. New Medical Bay, looking out at the escort fleet through the reinforced windows. Human, Zephyrian, and Corvan ships flew together in perfect formation, protecting those who dedicated their lives to healing others. The future was uncertain, but it was brighter than it had been before. The attack on the sanctuary had tried to destroy hope, but instead it had created something stronger. It had created unity.